you for downloading from Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. Support for this podcast comes from your generous gifts and donations. You can find out more about Ravi Zacharias and the team at www.rzim.org.
RZIM is privileged to have 40-some speakers placed in about a dozen-plus countries globally. One of the great thrills I have is working alongside these wonderful voices. I think a unique one and a highly blessed one, an influential one in our team is Jill Caratini. I still remember the day she walked into our office for the first time several years ago. And what a bright light she has been. She has inspired my own life, and watching her grow and blossom into a powerful writer has truly been a thrill. Her recent studies at Duke have only enriched her. Her desire to bridge the gospel with artistic expression is a powerfully relevant approach in our time.
One of the reasons why I so love the arts and find it of value to the ministry of apologetics and evangelism around the world is that it really does help us embody the story a bit more, to involve our senses in what we're saying about truth. So it's very easy to make truth statements and have them kept almost abstract or only in our minds. But the arts really do help us bring them back down, to live with them and try them out. And that is exactly what Jesus wants us to do.
This ministry is growing so drastically and so dramatically, but so pointedly, and we need you to stand with us and be enablers for us. Please ask the Lord what he would have you to do to stand with our RZIM at this time. We'll be grateful, and on behalf of our entire worldwide team, this is Ravi Zacharias saying thank you so much. That when you come down to the core of pluralization, it cannot take us to deny the law of non-contradiction, or we do so at enormous peril, and they will be the first ones to let you know that it is not denied in the core of their own cultures.
A culture under the influence of secularization does more than reject religion. It leads us on a path that eliminates the very foundations upon which humanity is built. Where are we as a culture, and where are we headed? Hello and welcome to Let My People Think with author and apologist Ravi Zacharias. This week we're listening to the conclusion of a message from Ravi titled Secularization, Its Control and Power. Now there's no doubt we're in a secularized culture, but what does that mean for us? How has that reality impacted humanity? Last week Ravi addressed this subject, and he talked about the mood of pluralism. Today he continues on that point as he begins with a familiar illustration on this program, but one that makes the point in a powerful way. Here's Ravi.
Now let me give you a fascinating illustration of this. You'll have to forgive me if you've heard it, but I don't know how to better tell it after all these years, and so this is the best way. I happened to be speaking in California several years ago, and a professor from the local university, an American gentleman who was professor of philosophy, came up to the front to challenge me. And he said, Mr. Zacharias, I want you to do me a favor. You are a Christian, I see. I said, yes, sir. He said, will you one day this week speak on the subject why you are not a Hindu? I said, what do you want me to do that for? He said, because I will bring my class. He said, I have become one of that persuasion, and I will bring my whole class, and after you finish that subject, they will just rip you to shreds. I said, you consider that an enticing invitation for me that I have to do this? And I said, no. I said, even if they weren't going to rip me to shreds, that's not what I want to talk about. I said, but I tell you what, one night this week I'm speaking on why I am a Christian. You bring your class and let them have a go at me at that time. I said, implicit in why I am this is why I'm not anything else. He said, well, I don't quite like that, but okay, we'll come. And he came, and one of the concepts I gave was that in some of the Eastern pantheistic worldviews, by their own recognition, there is systemic contradiction at the core. If you take the teachings of Shankara vis-a-vis Ramanuja, you will see the difference between the two. And I talked about the systemic contradictions that are of a very serious nature, even stated by Mahatma Gandhi. And so as I presented them and I finished, he came to the front and he said, you got a big problem. The problem is you're studying an Eastern religion like a Westerner, and if you'd quit studying it like a Westerner and understand what the laws of logic really are, you'll see that systemic contradictions are not really a problem. And what was astounding about this was that this was a Westerner telling me that I was studying the Eastern religion as a Westerner. But I respected his office, so I said, I tell you what, sir. I said, your students are standing around here. You and I are going to get into an argument to try to impress them. I'm really not interested in that at all. I said, do me a favor, let's go out and have lunch one of these days. And I pulled a Josh McDowell line on him. I said, you pay and I'll pray and we'll meet. He said, all right, we'll do that. He said, can I bring the professor of psychology with me? I still don't know why he did, whether the psychologist wanted to study two subjects or not. But I said, I don't mind you bringing him. I said, but let's make this agreement. We're not there to impress him. You and I are going to talk because you made a tremendous allegation about my thinking. I want to talk to you about it. He said, that's fine. So we came and the professor of psychology and I had already finished our meal. This gentleman hadn't even touched his. It was getting congealed sitting in front of him. And he was about a lecture in logic. He began by saying there are two kinds of logic. I knew right off the bat he wasn't headed in the right direction because there are more than two kinds of logic. But he said there were two. And he said, one is the law of non-contradiction, the either-or system of logic, either this or that. And he went on to describe how the either-or functions in its affirmations and its denials and so on, went through the basic laws of logic, law of rational inference and the undistributed middle, all of this. He went through all of that. And he said, so the either-or logic, that it is either this or that, is a Western way of thinking. I said, stop right there now. I said, I don't believe you are absolutely correct. He said, yes, I am. I said, no, you're not. He said, yes, I am. I said, no, you're not. I said, all right, just write it down. We'll come back to it. So he wrote it down and we came back. Then he went on. He said, the second is the both-hand kind of logic. It is the dialectical, a la Hegel in his ideational worldview, not the thesis or the antithesis. You pull them together, you find the synthesis. Or Karl Marx in his dialectical economic theory, you take the employer and the employee, find middle ground and bring them right in that median, as it were. So he said, this both and does not deal with things the way either or does. It is not the mutually exclusive, not the law of non-contradiction. It is dialectical. It is both and. It is an Eastern way of thinking. I said, the way I've stated, I can't accept that. He said, yes, it's true. I said, no, it isn't. He said, it's true. I said, all right, write it down. We'll come back to it. Now, so he writes it down and his placemats are used not only from our table but from all the other tables, and he's going this either or, law of non-contradiction, both and dialectical, either or Western, both and Eastern. For example, if you were to bump into me that morning along with my wife and you said to me, hi Ravi and Margie, nice to meet you. And you would say to me, Margie, I hear you are pregnant and you're expecting a baby. Is that true? What would you say if at the same time I said yes and she said no? Would you say, is this an Eastern way of thinking or is this a Western way of thinking? The same question at the same time, meaning the same thing, eliciting two opposite answers. I think you would either conclude that you asked the wrong question, that is not Margie, that's not my wife, we haven't talked about it, that we may need some marital counseling, that we have a weird sense of humor. You certainly would not conclude that your question has been answered. So I looked at him and I said, sir, here's my question for you. You have taken the Eastern way of thinking as both and dialectical, the Western way of thinking either or, either this or that, the law of non-contradiction, and you're telling me that I'm making a mistake when I'm studying an Eastern religion, say like Hinduism, and wondering whether it is right or wrong and studying it as a Westerner, therefore you think I've discounted the correct use of logic. He said, that is correct. I said, so let me ask you this question. What you're really saying to me is, when I study this particular religious system, I either use the both-hand method or nothing else. Is that right? That I either use the both-hand system of logic or nothing else. Is that right? At this point, the psychologist looked at him and grinned like saying, I think the lunch is over. But, the fascinating thing is what he said. He had just picked up his knife and fork and he put it down and he said, the either or does seem to emerge, doesn't it? I said, sir, I got some shocking news for you. Even in India, we look both ways before we cross the street. It is either the bus or me, not both of us. One of the two. Now, the problem is that he was partially correct, but he was in a total system false. There is a sense in which there is this pluralism of thinking, where different worldviews are brought in some kind of mix. But it is not at the heart of the belief system. I can assure you there are some unqualified non-negotiables. Shankara himself said that. Shankara dealt with this truth on the basis of debates, as did Gautama Buddha. And Gautama Buddha urged his followers to check out the reference, to check out the thinking, to check out the truth. I spent scores of hours with Buddhist monks last year before I wrote my book, The Lotus and the Cross. And you could see very quickly where those non-negotiables were. The denial of the essential nature of a self, the ultimate denial of all desires, and the denial of the very knowledge and the possibility of the knowledge of God, if not the denial of the very existence of God, the denial of the legitimacy of prayer because it assumes a significant other. You go on and on and on. And all I'm saying to you is that when you come down to the core of pluralization, while its culinary delights may be wonderful, while its accents may be a pleasure to the ears, while the friendships and the enrichments are numerous, it cannot take us to deny the law of non-contradiction, or we do so at enormous peril, and they will be the first ones to let you know that it is not denied in the core of their own cultures. I have never lectured at an Islamic university where they have not disagreed with the law of non-contradiction. Never. In fact, I've been invited to come and now deliver 2 lectures in Syria, in Aleppo, and in Damascus at their leading universities. They had taken the law of non-contradiction and recognized it very well. And I say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the peril of denying the law of non-contradiction is intense. Now, deep in our minds, I know the kind of thinking that does go on. We deal with paradoxes, we deal with various polarities of thinking and so on. And I'm not denying that there are times in our thinking and in our discussions where we run up against these kinds of mysteries that boggle the mind, but let us never forget it was in reference to quantum that Einstein said, God does not play dice. He could not subscribe to a totally randomness at the underpinnings of this universe. And here it is what G.K. Chesterton so wonderfully said. He said, the man who denies any absolutes and rebels against everything is a skeptic and will not entirely trust anything. He has no loyalty, therefore he can never be a true revolutionist. And the fact that he doubts everything gets in his way when he wants to denounce anything. For all denunciation implies a moral doctrine of some kind. And the modern revolutionist doubts not only the institution he denounces, but the doctrine by which he denounces it. Thus he writes one book complaining that imperial oppression insults the purity of women. Then he writes another book, a novel, in which he insults it himself. He curses the Sultan because Christian girls lose their virginity, then curses Mrs. Grundy because they keep it. As a politician, he cries out that war is a waste of life, and then as a philosopher that life itself is a waste of time. A Russian pessimist will denounce a policeman for killing a peasant, then prove by the highest philosophical principles that the peasant ought to have killed himself. A man who denounces marriage as a lie, then denounces aristocratic profligates for treating it as a lie. He calls the flag a bauble, then blames the oppressors of Poland or Ireland because they take away that bauble. The man of this school goes first to a political meeting where he complains that savages are treated as if they were beasts. Then he takes his hat and umbrella and goes on to a scientific meeting where he proves that they practically are beasts. In short, the modern revolutionist, being an infinite skeptic, is always engaged in undermining his own minds. In his book on politics, he attacks men for trampling on morality. In his book on ethics, he attacks morality for trampling on men. Therefore, the modern man in revolt has become practically useless for all purposes of revolt. By rebelling against everything, he's lost his right to rebel against anything. Think about it. And just in case we don't get it in our postmodern world, with such stark logic and prose, let's take the poet's view of this. I'm talking about Steve Turner, the English journalist, who gave me ready permission permission to use this. Steve Turner is kind of one of those satirists who looks at reality and then mocks our own duplicities. Listen to what he says about contemporary humanity, particularly the Western world. We believe in Marx, Freud, and Darwin. We believe everything is okay as long as you don't hurt anyone, to the best of your definition of hurt and to the best of your definition of knowledge. We believe in sex before, during, and after marriage. We believe in the therapy of sin. We believe that adultery is fun. We believe that taboos are taboo. We believe that everything's getting better despite evidence to the contrary. The evidence must be investigated, and you can prove anything with evidence. We believe there's something in horoscopes, UFOs, and bent spoons. Jesus was a good man, just like Buddha, Muhammad, and ourselves. He was a good moral teacher, although we think some of his good morals were really bad. We believe that all religions are basically the same. At least the ones that we read were. They all believe in love and goodness. They only differ on matters of creation, sin, heaven, hell, God, and salvation. We believe that after death comes the nothing, because when you ask the dead what happens, they say nothing. If death is not the end, if the dead have lied, then it's compulsory heaven for all, excepting perhaps Hitler, Stalin, and Genghis Khan. We believe in Masters and Johnson. What's selected is average, what's average is normal, what's normal is good. We believe in total disarmament, because we believe there are direct links between warfare and bloodshed. Americans should beat their guns into tractors, and the Russians would be sure to follow. We believe that man is essentially good. It's only his behavior that lets him down. This is the fault of society. Society is the fault of conditions, and conditions are the fault of society. We believe that each man must find the truth that is right for him, and reality will adapt accordingly. The universe will readjust. History will alter. We believe that there is no absolute truth, accepting the truth that there is no absolute truth. We believe in the rejection of creeds and the flowering of individual thought. And then he puts this postscript. If chance be the father of all flesh, disaster is his rainbow in the sky. And when you hear state of emergency, sniper kills 10, troops on rampage, youths go looting, bomb blasts school, it is but the sound of man worshipping his maker. If chance be the father of all flesh, disaster is his rainbow in the sky. And when you hear state of emergency, sniper kills 10, youths go looting, bomb blast school, it's but the sound of man worshipping his maker. The logical outworking of what Nietzsche said is right. When you take away shame, when you take away reason, as pluralization does, and you move to the final thought of privatization. Secularization ends up with no shame. Pluralization ends up with no reason, and privatization ends up with no meaning. What do I mean by privatization? It is where there is a breakdown between your public and your private life, and you're compelled to take the things of ultimate value into the private world. So you can be religious in America now if you want, but don't bring it out into the public. You can do that in India, you can do that in the Middle East, but don't do it in America, because we are plural. Severing the nerve of what is of ultimate value. Severing the nerve of what is of ultimate value. Keep your religion private. Keep your religion in your private world. And privatization is compelling of all faiths, particularly the Christian faith, to hibernate, to go out into a cloister, because to bring it into the public life is to violate the affirmations that we want to hold on to. And I say to you, we are living in dangerous times, not because of attacks from outside of this land, but because this land no longer knows what it believes. Until we know what we believe here and what it is that is worth preserving, we will never know what it is that's really being attacked. As one Middle Easterner said to a friend, while disavowing everything that has happened recently, said, we have a lot of freedoms here and a lot of buying power, but I'm getting convinced that the price is paid by our souls. The price is being paid by our souls. There are serious questions stalking There are serious questions which are confronting us, and one of those is the Christian faith going to become purely a privatized thing? And if so, what we will really end up doing is breaking life's thread of meaning. You see an average young person in high school today, and he or she, what is endemic in our high schools is a loss of meaning. There is no meaning left in life. And so secularization ends to know shame, pluralization with no reason, privatization with no meaning. Let me end with a simple illustration and a quotation from Daniel Yankelovich, which basically sustains what I have said to you. An existentialist writer talks about a person who is a merchant and goes into the city one day to sell his diamonds. And he brings his wife in there for the first time, and she's nervous. So he's going about his business, and he tells her, why don't you visit the stores? I'll see you at the end of the day at this particular intersection. When he's gone, she begins to think this is the first time she's been freed, and first time she's back in an open arena of options, and thought of a teenage dream she used to have, which the writer doesn't tell us, but basically to say it was some kind of a sensuous dream. And she wonders, should she give in to it? She now has the opportunity, as she's alone. But she struggles because she wonders what would happen if her husband ever found out, what would this mean, and all of the ramifications back and forth. Finally, she somehow resists, meets her husband at the end of the day. They go and have dinner, go into a hotel room, check in for the night. Within minutes, he is sound asleep. She's lying with her head on the pillow, wide awake, saying, I may never have this chance again. She gets out of the room, quietly gets changed, goes out, in the words of the writer, enjoys the lust of the night. Comes back, gets changed. And back in bed, the husband has not known she's been gone. And as she lies in bed, now come the tears. The tears are coming down the side of the face, first gently, then more and more, till uncontrollably she sits up in bed and sobs, sobbing her heart out. And the husband, jolted awake, sits up, sees her, and puts his arm around her and says, what's the matter? What's the matter? What's happened? And she just shoves him away and says, nothing. Just nothing. That is good existential anticlimax. Because the loneliest moment in life is when you have just experienced that which you thought would deliver the ultimate, and it's let you down. And you have done so at the cost of some boundaries that you had drawn, and some lines that defined who you were in your conscience, not just who you were in your social preferences. And I say to you, ladies and gentlemen, the categories are struggling. We cannot define them anymore because secularism has led to a loss of shame, pluralization to a loss of reason. Who needs even explain that anymore with postmodernism, and privatization with a loss of meaning. Now, just in case you think that the Christian preacher is the only one who's sort of sounding forth this warning, listen to Yankelovich and how he ends his extensive article on the breadth of change that takes place when culture has lost its point of reference and how high the stakes are. He does numerous studies of various individuals and couples, and his closing paragraph is this, after studying one couple and making his conclusions. If you feel it is imperative to fill all your needs, and what I would say therefore is that there's no categories anymore, and if these needs are contradictory, or simply in conflict with those of others, or simply unfillable, then frustration inevitably follows. To Abby and to Mark as well, self-fulfillment means having a career, and marriage, and children, and sexual freedom, and autonomy, and being liberal, and having money, and choosing nonconformity, and insisting on social justice, and enjoying city life, and country living, and simplicity, and graciousness, and reading, and good friends, and on and on. You see, the individual is not truly fulfilled by becoming ever more autonomous, says Yankelovich. Indeed, he says to move too far in this direction is to risk psychosis, the ultimate form of autonomy. And then he gives these brilliant lines. The injunction that to find oneself, one must lose oneself, contains a truth any seeker of self-fulfillment needs to grasp. You know, I know of nowhere else where that statement comes to full expression than at the cross of Jesus Christ.
As Daniel Yankelevich so eloquently reminded us, true contentment doesn't come from having everything. It's only possible through a relationship with Jesus Christ. You've been listening to Ravi Zacharias and the conclusion of his message, Secularization, Its Control and Power. You can order a copy of this message by calling us at 1-800-448-6766. You can also order online at www.rzim.org.
People are interested in having a spiritual life, but treat faith more like an a la carte menu at a restaurant, choosing what they like and dismissing the rest. Cutting through the hype and seduction is the clear voice of author and apologist Ravi Zacharias. In his book, Why Jesus? Rediscovering His Truth in an Age of Mass-Marketed Spirituality, Ravi answers the attraction known as the New Spirituality.
It's so fascinating that people who are so successful look for spiritual answers, and when they end up with a sheerly mystical, without any doctrine, and no person behind that truth but they themselves, they end up actually disappointing their own pursuits.
Charles Swindoll says, I'm not acquainted with a brighter mind or a more relevant and devoted defender of the faith than Ravi Zacharias. Why Jesus? Available in bookstores now or online at rzim.org.
If you'd like to write, address your envelope to RZIM, Post Office Box 921939, Norcross, Georgia 30010. That's RZIM, P.O. Box 921939, Norcross, Georgia 30010. Let My People Think is a listener-supported radio ministry and a production of Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, Atlanta, Georgia.